So, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. Thanks for taking out the time and attending our webinar. We promise we're going to make it worth your while. Um, I'd like to introduce our two speakers for the day. We have Eric Treshfield and Swati Agarwal. Eric has been in the Salesforce system since 2009. He has even been an MVP every year since 2013. And actually, all of his, efforts and his dedication to the Salesforce ecosystem is what has also earned him a place in the MVP Hall of Fame. He continues to inspire all of us as a community. He's been a speaker at Dreamforce several times as well. He even has founded Midwest Dreamin', which is actually one of the largest Midwest uh, Salesforce community gatherings or events. So yeah, we have a great thought leader, someone who's contributed a lot to all of us as a community in general. And we're so glad to welcome you here, Eric, in this webinar.
Thanks for having me on.
Our second speaker for the day is Swati Agarwal. She's a Salesforce DevOps architect. She has 7 Salesforce certifications and Copado certifications. She is and multiple Copado mentorships as well under her belt. She's a well-recognized Copado champion, and she excels in optimizing Salesforce deployments, streamlining processes, and fostering a collaborative culture. Her technical expertise also is matched by her love for connecting with others and sharing her knowledge in the Salesforce ecosystem. So we're very happy to have these two speakers with us today. And I'd like to hand it over to Eric to take it forward from here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to cover quickly kind of the objectives of what we're wanting to talk about today, and then we will dive right into the content. So the overall goal is really to help you all understand how you can transform complex Salesforce implementations using Copado pipelines. So what is a complex Salesforce implementation, right? We're going to cover what that means. We're going to break that down into the various pieces and parts of what that involves, including multiple teams, multiple vendors, overlapping project timelines, conflict resolution, and all sorts of other good pieces of information. We will talk about the various challenges that we have to identify as part of this process. We'll be using the term anti-patterns when we're talking about some things today, and that was a term that was new to me when we first started talking about this webinar. For those of you not familiar with that term, essentially an anti-pattern is the opposite of a best practice. And we'll talk about some of those things as well. And then obviously we'll talk about how to adopt best practices, what Copado pipeline can do to help enable that and help your integrations become seamless, your deployments become easier and more beneficial, and all of that to help benefit the management of your complex Salesforce projects. And with that, the first thing we're going to take a look at is the anti-pattern of using a merge box for integration. And what you see here is that the customer is really juggling 2 different Salesforce initiatives, very significant in each on their own right. They're managed by different vendors. They have different processes. They have different timelines. They do share some similar components within their Salesforce instance, and their go lives are scheduled just a few weeks apart. So the initial plan you see involves using the merge box for the integration before staging, and that really does cause some additional challenges that need to be addressed. And with that, Lottie, you'll be talking about the challenges and going into some more details.
Sure, Eric. Thank you for covering this up. So now we'll discuss the challenges which we'll face in the merge box strategy. That is one of the anti-pattern as Eric discussed. So first of all, we have lots of merge conflicts. Since both the teams are deploying at the same point of time, we will have a lot of merge conflicts. due to the overlapping changes from the multiple teams. Next, we'll have testing trouble since the changes are not isolated, right? So testing team will have a hard time to find the bugs and fix them. Also, the changes are merged prematurely in the merge box. That is also one more reason where the testing team will have trouble fixing the issues and doing the testing. Since we are getting a lot of merge conflicts, which will eventually give deployment failures and which will eventually add on to the increased deployment times. So that is the deployment delays. Next in the list is the additional infrastructure and testing burden. So since this approach demands extra infrastructure both from the testing team and also it increases the complexity, it also amplifies testing efforts from both the like point of view from the testing team and the developers. So that's why these are a couple of challenges from the merge box strategy. Next, we'll discuss the best practices against this anti-pattern. So here we have two developer teams, let's say project 1 and project 2. They are developing in their own sandboxes. They have their own SIT box. So let's say project 1 go live team is after 2 weeks and project 2 go live is after a month. So project 2 has ample amount of time where they can do the UAT once the UAT is done for project 1 team. So here, as you can see in the screenshot, project 1 is going to SIT and then UAT. Once they reach to stage, Tana, can you click on the animation? Yeah. So once they click on this stage, at this point of time, the project 2 team is ready to deploy the changes to UAT. So with this strategy, there will be very less conflict since both the teams have the separate cadence where they are reaching to UAT box. The testing team also will have a focused strategy for testing where they don't have to deal with both the teams changes. And in case of shared components, they don't have to juggle, right? So the changes are isolated and the testing will be proper. And if there are any issues, they can resolve it faster. Since we have a proper cadence for UAT also and stage also, the deployment will be very smooth and there will be no delays in the deployments. Eric, over to you.
Yep. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is transitioning mid-project into utilizing Copado. And what you can see on the slide here is multiple development teams working initially into one sandbox and into one UAT. And what we have then is the challenge of incorporating hundreds of user stories into this process and promoting them into the other environment for testing and for integration. The previous commits were not tracked in Copado, so that is kind of an unknown. It provides additional challenges that need to be considered, and effectively in this particular example, the UAT sandbox is functioning as the single source of truth, and that's not the best way to handle things. So Swati, why don't you tell us a little bit more details on these challenges and then how to overcome those?
Yeah. So as we discussed the anti-pattern, so this is a very common scenario where let's say a customer is about to use Copado. So they are in the process of acquiring Copado and it took some time to do the process. And meanwhile, the development is already happening. By the time Copado is set up in the environment, team has a lot of stories lying in the entire pipeline. So let's say pipeline is multiple dev boxes, then we have QA, UAT, and production. So now let's say UAT has almost like 100 plus stories which are there and they're not even tracked in Git. So at this point of time, what the team has done, so they have taken a full snapshot. So now if you take a full snapshot, and you try to deploy the stories, you will face a lot of conflict issues. Whenever you deploy any changes, even though the components are not part of your story, you will get tons of merge conflicts, which will again take a lot of time in resolving those issues. Second, we'll have deployment failures since the UAT box can have deprecated code, right? Which was merged into the Git. And when you try to deploy these, it will cause a lot of deployment failures. And when you troubleshoot, it will take a lot of bandwidth from the developers. And then we have a lot like deployment issues where when you try to debug, it is taking a lot of time. The last but not the least, since Salesforce has a limitation of 10,000 components or 39 MB, whichever is higher. So let's say when you take a full snapshot, right? full snapshot means all the components of the environment is going into the Git. So let's say there are more than 10,000 components, and when you try to deploy, you will hit governor limits. So that is why this pattern is not suggested and it's considered as an anti-pattern. Now we'll discuss on the best practice against this approach. So in spite of going with the full snapshot, try to go with the sprint-wise development. Also, Copado is designed by keeping in mind the agile framework. So let's say we have two dev teams, dev 1 and dev 2, okay? And we have a 2-week sprint. So as and when your sprints are getting completed, you commit the stories in the stories and then deploy sprint-wise. Do not make your stories bundle up. Let's say you have done 10 sprints, right? And you are not deploying the stories. So again, you will have a lot of issues. So deploy sprint wise and not story wise. So with this approach, there will be no issues in the deployment. Also, the testing team can also troubleshoot the deployments easily. And sorry, the testing team can troubleshoot the issues properly. And the deployment also will be smoother since we are not bundling up a lot of stories for the deployments. Yeah, so as we just now discussed, the advantages, I'll just again go through it. So they will be like with the incremental changes, the alignment and consistency with all the environments will be enhanced. Then we'll have less troubleshooting, and more important, if we have any rollback, right? So let's say I have to roll back particular change, and since we are going story wise, so it is very easy to roll back. If we go with the full snapshot pattern, then we can't roll back to a specific change. That is one of the biggest advantage here. And then again, we'll have efficient deployments, and the release team or the developers, their usage will be like properly, and they don't have to spend a lot of hours in the deployments debugging.
Fantastic, thank you. So next thing that we're going to talk about is how to manage diverse release cadences. In this particular example, the customer is managing many long-running major releases, minor releases, hot fixes across multiple teams, probably across multiple products, sales, service, CPQ, for example, and all of those have their own different cadences in which those processes are taking place. And what you run into here really is the risk of overwrites and conflicts. It increases as you do multiple things up against each other running on the different timelines, which can certainly cause a lot more conflicts and some loss of progress. You may end up going backwards in your progress at times, depending on how overwrites are happening. It's obviously going to create inefficiencies in your testing process as you have more difficulty trying to conduct your focus testing and moving forward, and it's going to slow down your progress and impact your quality assurance. And then finally, you have issues with release scheduling as well, with competing priorities in the single environment, causing more bottlenecks and more delays in the release schedules. And ultimately, all of this slows your productivity down, slows down your enhancements being rolled out, and ultimately costs your organization money and time.
Now we'll discuss the best practice again, the single sandbox strategy. So here we have multiple teams and they have their own cadence. So as we can see here, um, one team is going with the minor releases where they're deploying every week. Then we have a second team which are deploying, like they are working on the major release model and they're deploying monthly basis. And then we have a long running release. So they are basically a big project which for which the duration is not fixed. Either they'll go quarterly or yearly. So in that type of scenario, how we'll plan a release cadence. So here we have given separate sandboxes to all the teams. So if you can see, we have sales dev, service dev, and marketing dev for all the teams. They are working in their own individual sandboxes. Once their work is done, so let's consider for the minor release first. Once the development is done, they'll do a commit of the stories in a feature branch as Copado is based on feature branch model. Then they deploy the changes to INT. The star here, which is the gray in color, it means it's partially integrated. This INT is not fully integrated. Once the changes are deployed to INT and then it reach UAT, at this point of time, we are doing a automated back promotion to the other teams. that is the major release team, and for the long running project. Similarly, if we can see, we have a major release team. When they develop the changes in their own sandbox, and once they are ready, they deploy the changes to INT, and then they reaches to UAT. Here, your UAT is a fully integrated environment where the testing will be happening. And then from as soon as the stories are reached to UAT, the automated back motion will be happening to the respective teams. And eventually then once all the changes are done, they will be going to production. Tanya, can you go to next slide? Okay, so now we'll discuss a very interesting issue of the back promotions. So I'll not say it's an issue. It's actually, if you're not following a best practice, um, ideally the back promotion should happen as soon as possible, and you should not wait until the production deployment. So here we are trying to show, if you wait till production deployment and you do a back promotion post your production release, what issue you will get. So here, since the base plant is always master, and if you can see here, we have two dev teams, user developer 1 and developer 2. Developer 1 has done his development in his dev sandbox, and now he's ready to do a commit. Once he does his commit, a commit ID called C1 is generated, and now he's ready to deploy the story. So now when the story 1 is deployed to production, the C1 commit reached to production. Okay. Now at this point of time, developer 2 has not done a back promotion of story 1 in its environment. And before doing a back promotion, developer 2 has done a commit in its instance. So now what will happen, since master already has C1 in it, okay? So when developer 2 does a commit, he will eventually get C1 in his commit. So now if you can see from the screenshot, developer 2, the dev2 branch has both C1 and C2. C1 has done the deployment to production, and now he wants to take the changes from developer 1 in his sandbox. So at this point of time, when the developer 2 wants to take a back promotion of story 1, there is nothing to merge, since the dev2 branch already has a history of C1. Okay, since there's nothing to merge, there will be nothing to deploy at this point of time. So let's say I'm deploying from story 1, I have developed a flow. Okay, since there was nothing to merge, the flow is actually not deployed to the next the dev2 environment. The changes are not merged, and since the changes are not merged, the flow changes are not deployed to the environment also. Yeah, so there's nothing to deploy. So now we will see how we can mitigate this issue and how we can adopt a best practice. So as we discussed, do not wait till production for the back promotion. Do the back promotion as soon as possible. So here we are doing a back promotion from stage environment. So again, the scenario is same. Base plant is again master. Developer 1 has done some development in the sandbox, and now he's ready to do a commit. When it does a commit, a C1 ID is generated. Now, when it deploys this change, what we are doing, we are not deploying the story to production. When the story is in stage, we are performing a back promotion at this point of time. So what will happen with this strategy? Even though the story is not back promoted to dev2 sandbox, when developer 2 does a commit, since the base plant is master, when it does a commit, his dev branch will only have C2. C1 is not in the history of dev2. Okay. So now when C2 developer does his deployment to production, and now when you want to take a back promotion, there will be no issue in the back promotion. The components are successfully merged in the dev2, and this way, um, there is no chance of the components getting missed in the back promotion process. Yeah. So, and eventually the C1 gets merged into the sandbox. Next, we'll have some recommendations. Eric, do you want to discuss the same?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Swati. So obviously, the first thing we want to talk about is recommending the right testing strategy. You need to make sure that the testing strategy is set up for the environments and fully integrated, and it is properly optimized to be utilized properly. And then the other serious recommendation is to make sure you have a rollback and rollover strategy, because obviously, as we tried to demonstrate, you can see issues where you might be overwriting things inadvertently. And in any case, if a bug is introduced somewhere in production, you're going to want to be able to remove that and remove it quickly and easily. So having a rollback strategy in place to make sure that can happen is very critical.
Next, we have user story dependency feature, that is a Copado feature. So it is most useful when we have working on shared component. So let's say I'm working on a layout. That's part of story one, and then we have a story two, which has a field. So now they both are dependent. So the field cannot go without the layout. In this case, if we deploy the story separately, we'll have deployment failures. So what we can do in spite of this deployment story separately, we can create a dependency here. So unless the parent is deployed, the child cannot go. And even if you try to deploy, you will get an warning from Copado end that, hey, there's a dependency missing. So using this approach, especially with the shared components, you will be your deployments will be streamlined, and the dependency also you will be able to manage it properly. That let us come to the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions or queries, feel free to ask. Also, if you have any issues with your pipeline, you can write to us at success@cloudprograms.com.
I
So
do
if
see we
anyone
have a
has
question
any
in the
issues,
Q&A box at this point in time. Sanjay is asking, isn't the merge conflict resolution effort the same? And then he continues on with additional comments about that. So what do you think on that, Swati?
yeah, I'm about to mention the same. So Sanjay here, we have not discussed two separate merge sandbox. The scenario, Tanya, is it possible for you to go to that merge sandbox slide again? The first one, the first scenario which we discussed. No, not this one. I guess it's a fourth slide. Yeah. So here we have discussed that both the teams are developing in their own sandboxes, okay? And then they are merging at the same point of time in the merge box, which is because of which we will have a lot of merge conflicts. Also, the merge box is typically not a fully integrated environment. And since the teams are just deploying the changes as a parking space in merge box, that is where the issue is. And if you see here, the merge box is just a developer copy. So we have bifurcated the clouds here. That is where the issue is. Also, when you ask about the merge conflict, no, the effort is not the same. Since in the best practice, what we are doing after the project, one team has done its development and then they are deploying. At this point of time, they have done their development. Now, after the dev one team is done, the dev two team will get the back promotions, and then they will be doing the deployment to UAT box, which is the best practice we have discussed. So in this case, the effort in the merge conflict is not the same. Also, testing will also be easy. So did I answer your question, Sanjay? Mahendra, essential plus I'm not sure, but as far as I know, the rollback option is not there in the rollback. But if you want more details, I can check and then get back to you. Okay, then we have a question from Uri. Uri, could you please elaborate your question? Okay. Let's move to the next question. There's another question from Maria. What is the recommended approach of using base branches for multiple teams during one release cycle? So first of all, it is not a best practice to touch the base branch. Anyways, you are deploying and the stories incrementally, right? Then why we need you need to touch the base branch also in this scenario? Even though you have multiple teams, there is no need to touch the base branch to another branch. Or if you want to change the base branch, so let's say I'm deploying okay, so let's say I have developed a piece of code in story one. Okay. Now the developer two is also working on the same piece of code. So what we can do, we can set the base branch of story one as a base branch of story two. This you can do, but I will not suggest to set the base branch as the environment branches. So because if you set the base branch as the environment branch, and if the story will reach beyond the base branch, then you can wreck your pipeline, and it can cause a heavy like loss on your end. You have to literally invest a lot of hours in finding what is the issue and what went wrong. So do not touch the base branch and set the master. Or if there's a need, as I mentioned, you can mention the user story feature branch on this on the base as a base branch. There's a question from Dina. For the same pattern, what's the test execution recommended? Could you please explain what for which pattern you are asking here, Dina? Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay, we have a question from Bram. We are saying merge box not to introduce before stage, but it can be included prior layer to that as int box and merge changes and deploy to merge box and stage. Uh, Ram, we are not saying that you cannot have a merge box. You can have a merge box, but the cadence should be different, right? If both the teams are deploying at the same point of time, then there's a lot of issue which will happen. Moreover, when both the teams are deploying at the same time, right? The testing team they can't isolate the changes, and that's when the issue will come. So let's say in the merge sandbox, the testing there's a bug introduced by dev one team, right? And since both the teams are deploying at the same time and they are working on shared components, that's when the testing team can't identify. Moreover, when you have merge conflicts, right, it will take a lot of developers' time to resolve the conflicts also. Okay, there's a question from Ramesh. What's the best time to for automate the back promotion to lower dev boxes? So Ramesh, as I mentioned, you should do it as often as possible. You should not wait until production deployment, or even if you want to do after production, then you have to make sure that there are no more commits happening from in the low environments until the back promotion is deployed to the low environments. Did I answer your question, Ramesh? Okay, I have one more question from Mahendra. Let's say I have stage or with stage branch with bundle of stories. Now I want to pull out of two out of 10. Remaining eight I can direct deliver to and not create separate bundle for eight again. So Mahendra, it depends what strategy you are using for deployment, right? If you are using a bundle, which I guess you mentioned bundle, right? With bundling feature, you can't pull out because when you create a bundle, it takes the code from the sandbox and not from the story level. Now, let's say you're going with one promotion, okay? So let's say you have one promotion and you're merging the stories in one promotion. In that scenario, yes, you can pull out two stories and then add the remaining eight, and then you can go to production. Then there will be no issues. There are a couple of questions. Just let me just read them. There's a question from Maria. What are the requirements for user stories to be bundled in Copado successfully into one story for further deployment or back promotion in the pipeline? So Maria, there are two approaches. First, you can use a bundling feature, right? Which will, so let's say you have 10 stories. Okay, now they are waiting in UAT sandboxes. So here you can create a bundle. When you create a bundle, all these 10 stories are merged into one story. That way you can deploy, and this way you will, when you back promote, right, you will have very less merge conflicts, and this will be deployed fastly also. The deployments will be faster. Or if you want to bundle multiple stories, do not go single stories, right? So let's say you have 10 stories. Do not go one story one by one, right? You can merge the stories into one promotion. So that is also you can do. There's one more question. Okay, so Maria has again a question on merge conflicts in the automated back promotion. So Maria, when you say merge conflict has to be resolved manually, right? Um, Even if you do automated back promotion or you schedule the back promotion, the merge conflict has to be resolved manually. So when you setting in the automate back promotion, you can create some automation of your own, so that when you have a merge conflict, you will get the notification. Okay. Even Copado will send the email. So let's say you are deploying, right? You are doing the back promotion. So when there's a merge conflict, Copado sends an email where you will get the information that there's a merge conflict. So you have the conflict has to be resolved manually. It will not be done by Copado. We have one more question. We have a question from anonymous attendee. So if we back promote the changes while they are in stage, if a developer also commit the same component deployed to production, the chance of deploying the unwanted changes to prod, right? This question I don't know from whom it is. So when you're saying when we back promote from stage, right? Yeah. So when you're deploying the changes to production, first of all, we are mentioning the changes should be in a stable environment. So when you're saying stage and stable environment, right? The first story already reached production. You will not just park the story in stage, right? And then you will just do just do deployment of other story, right? There's a question from Mahendra. I have deployed 10 stories and I have an issue with work for one story, and then now I have to roll back only that story. Yes, it is possible to roll back single story, Mahendra. So rollback is on the promotion level. Okay. So let's say you're deploying story wise or promotion wise. Okay, whatever you're doing. So you can click the rollback button on the promotion and you can select the component which you want to roll back. The only issue will be if the same component is part of other stories, okay, then you don't have the option to cherry pick a story. You have to open the component and then you have to cherry pick the changes. Otherwise, the entire component will be rolled back. How to promote more than 100 user stories? There is no issue to promote more than 100 stories also, Ramesh. The only thing you have to consider is the ordering and what is the ordering you're managing here, right? If you just go by the default ordering from Copado, so in that case you will override the ordering from Copado is it's like ascending order. Okay, so let's say you have story 1, 2, 3. When you deploy story 1, 2, and 3, okay, the same order you're doing, so the story number 3 will override changes for 1 and 2. So there's no problem in deploying 100 stories. The only thing you have to make sure the ordering of stories is proper. Okay, and then you can go by bundling feature, or you can merge all the stories in one promotion. One more thing you have to consider is the Salesforce limit, right? Salesforce has a limit of 39 MB or 10,000 component, whichever is higher. Okay, so if your stories have more than 10,000 components or it has reached the 39 MB limit, then you need to bifurcate your stories in two promotions. That is the only limit you have to take care of. Uh, is There are a couple of more questions. Let me just read them. There's a question again. If those 10 in bundle the scenario, can you elaborate this question? I didn't get it. What's the meaning of this? If those 10 bundle the scenario? Okay, so you're bundling it up. Okay. So if you're bundling it up again, when you deploy, it will be through promotion, right? So at promotion level, you will have the component list. At that point of time, you can select which component you want to roll back. Do we have any other queries?
I think there was one earlier from Chris. I'm trying to scroll back up to it
Yeah, the
that you
slot.
missed. He says, would it make a difference if the merge box we shifted left to before SIT? Wouldn't removing the merge box essentially make staging the merge sandbox? I think he's trying to remove
Let me just
the
go
merge
through
box
that.
and make things a little bit, perhaps a little more efficient. 1028 is the timestamp on that one, that question,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're
I'm
trying
just
to
going through
find it.
that. So Chris, the question which you're asking, um, the thing which we want to show in the representation is the merge box. When we say merge box can most of the companies they don't use merge box as a full copy, right? When we say staging, staging is mostly a replica of production, right? And when we say Marchbox, most of the companies they don't use Marchbox as a full sandbox. They add a developer copy or a dev pro copy as a Marchbox. That is where the issue will come. Okay, so it will not. Okay, so when you say before we shifted to before SIT, yeah, so you can add a stage box in place of merge box. That will not be an issue. Okay. The only thing which you want to show there is that if you add a merge box, right? The merge box here, it's not basically a full copy sandbox. And then it's not a fully integrated environment, right? So testing will not be a proper testing. And merge box is mostly used as a parking space. Developers they just develop the stories and they just park the stories in merge box. That is the issue we were trying to highlight. Did I miss any other question, Eric?
I don't believe so. I'm scrolling back through. I think we may have covered them all. Can we go back to the last slide just to put up contact info?
Yeah.
In case
Um,
other people have questions, they
Dana, could
can
you go
send that
back to the
email
last
in.
slide? Uh,
Guess
the
it was
one
the one
before
right
it?
before there. Yeah.
Yeah. So guys, if you have any other queries, you can drop your queries at the email mentioned here. The email is success@cloudfulcrum.com. So if you can post your queries to this email and we'll be able to answer the same for you. Okay, that brings us at the end of the webinar. So thank you everyone for joining us today and be a part of this webinar.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great
Yeah.
day.
Thank you everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for your time.